Hey everybody, welcome to week 13. I hope that you had a great week and weekend. We are now into the final quarter of the class. We only got 4 weeks to go. Can you believe it? And you're on the other side of the concert report. So I know that was a bigger thing to worry about. And now that that's done, we can just carry on through to the end. Just a quick heads up, there is one assignment that's part of your final grade that I was just informed from the college I need to make happen a little bit earlier than the last night of class. So you'll see an extra little assignment. This is basically an assessment test. So if you see it popping up in the upcoming weeks in your assignments module, just make sure that you do it. It is part of your final grade. So it's based on everything that we've been learning, so you should be doing a good job, and you should do well on it. And it's related to something we did back at the very beginning of the class. So we are now, as we've continued in this journey of all these different genres, this week you're going to be learning about punk rock and new wave. And as you've already seen with some of the genres that we've done, like heavy metal and reggae and ska and all of that, we don't go all the way up until current times. They hit some of these later in the book, but we don't get there. And really what I'm concerned about is the foundations. As you've seen, you know, you're all pros by now. We've been doing this for 12 weeks. And so what we're looking at with punk rock and new wave is, you know, where did these genres come from? How did they develop? As I've said before, nothing exists in a vacuum. So, excuse me, where do these evolve out of? Where do they come from? And so interestingly enough, we've learned about Detroit, Motown and all of that. But Detroit plays a figure again, because we have Iggy Pop and the Stooges. We have the MC5 coming out of Detroit, and they're taking a very different take than what we heard from Motown. They're very much influenced by the industry that was going on. You know, Motown stands for Motor City, it's because there was a lot of auto factories there. So there was a lot of factories and making a lot of noise. And so it was influenced by that. It came out of the 60s. So really be mindful. Think about, some of these songs that you're going to be hearing, some of this music that you're going to be hearing is coming out at the same time that the Beatles are doing their thing and the Beach Boys are doing their thing. It's really quite interesting take. So you're going to learn about that. You're going to learn about the things that come out of New York, particularly the influences of both the Velvet Underground, which had a huge influence, not so much sonically on the sound of punk, but certainly in the attitude and the subject matter, then the New York Dolls. You're going to learn about a really important club called CBGB's, which had a very interesting scene. It was basically this biker wino bar that these bands started to be able to use, eventually starting on Sunday nights, and eventually it blew into a scene. This is the same time, by the way, that disco's starting to rise up. So at the same time you have these really fancy discos with Studio 54, you have this sleazy biker bar that becomes a home to what will become punk rock. And it's a fascinating scene, because it's not just like a punk a club, if you will, but they had a variety of styles and music. So just think about someone, you may not be aware of the band Television, you will after this, an incredible band, but you also have Patti Smith, you have the New York Dolls, you have the Talking Heads, you have Blondie, and you have the Ramones. And the Ramones were really the foundation of the punk sound, which interestingly was just a noisy, distorted version of a lot of 50s music. It really harkened back to the rock and roll of the 50s. And so you're going to be asked in these assignments, what other genres connect to punk? And so I want you to think about, what does it come from musically? And also, what about what they're saying? So really be thinking about those things. I'm really challenging you to start to make deeper connections with what you're learning than just spitting back historical facts to me. Those I'm actually less concerned about. The quizzes take care of that. What I'm more concerned about is, are you able to take in all these ideas and synthesize them into thought and words and everything? So you have this scene that comes out of New York, and then the Ramones travel over to England, and out of that, plus with Malcolm McLaren, who's a British fashion guy who sees what's going on in New York, and he goes back, and out of that forms the Sex Pistols and other bands like The Damned, and then The Clash and other folks. and then the Sex Pistols, who were only around for just, a little under 2 years, from 76 to 78, they tour here on the last, at basically the end of the band, but they inspire this resurgence of punk. So punk is really an American style that gets taken up, pushed, and politicized in England, and then brought back to here. And English punk and American punk, they're very different situations. What's going on in England with the poverty that's going on, the high unemployment rate, the garbage strikes and everything, it's very different than what's going on in the United States. So that's why they take a little bit of a different tack. And then from there, you end up with hardcore punk, and then really quickly the scene basically turns violent and becomes known for that. And you get bands like the Dead Kennedys, and then in LA you get Black Flag and X and the Circle Jerks and the Germs and all of that. So then you get another type of music called New Wave. New Wave sometimes gets misnamed as watered down punk, but that's not really what it is. It's an entirely different thing. New Wave is pretty crisp production, very clean. You might get horn sections. It might have a sense of humor. Very heavy use on synthesizers, where punk rock is really guitar, bass, and drums, just like 50s rock and roll. You might get more robotic or unnatural sounding voices. And so out of there, you'll get, bands like New Wave bands like Devo and the Talking Heads and the B-52s. And in England, out of the pub rock scene, you get Elvis Costello and Chrissie Hynde. So you're going to be learning about all of this as it moves things forward. And I noticed it was interesting in reading some of your reading when I asked about what your take was on progressive rock, and some of you are like, yeah, I really couldn't get into it. That is not uncommon. I would say that the two most challenging genres that we learn about in this class for some people is either progressive rock or punk rock, because it's just so noisy. So much of it, especially the hardcore punk, is more about screaming than singing. It oftentimes is very angry. And so there's some people that's like, yeah, I just can't get into this. But out of that punk rock scene, you ended up getting post-punk, which you'll learn about later. And then eventually you end up with bands like Nirvana. So without hardcore punk, you can't get to bands such as Nirvana. And they even influenced some of the sound of later metal. And then even later on bands like, the energy that would come out of the Black Keys and the White Stripes and stuff like that. And there are still bands out there now. So when I ask you for bands, current bands in a particular style, I don't want you to give me a band. People, it's not uncommon when I say, well, name a current band, and people will say, well, Green Day. Green Day's been around since, I think it's 1990. So you're talking about a band that's been around for 30 years, not a current band. Red Hot Chili Peppers has been around since 82, 83, something like that. Long, long time. So when I'm asking you for current bands, do a little digging. Go onto Spotify, go onto YouTube, look at charts, look at whatever you can. Don't just say, I don't know if there are any punk bands. I can tell you they are out there. Every genre that we're learning, there is some connection of it still to this day. There's young folks forming bands and doing it. It may be underground. It may not be as easy to find, but it's out there. So do a little digging, do a little work, see what you can find. I don't know, Google new punk bands. But I would say, anything from in the last 5 years. So what are we, 21? So let's say 2015, 2016 on. Okay, so I think that's it. This is a lengthy module. There's a lot of stuff in it. So, spend the time, work through it. Just a quick heads up. I see a lot of you that are still going for the how little can I put into this class approach. And so I can see the hours that you've put in, and the idea here is that we're here to learn, right? So I'm hoping that that's the case. I can't enforce it. I'm not your dad. But the goal is to learn, not to get through it. Trust me, you get on the other side. Like I've said before, the piece of paper isn't worth a whole lot. It's about what you learned in here and how you can manage time, problem solve, think creatively. Those are really going to be the things that are important down the line. So we have a few weeks left to go. Spend the time with your assignments, read the instructions, make sure you're following the instructions. Some of you are still not pasting the topic in the reflection observations, and some of you are still missing it. I'm still randomly catching people that are plagiarizing. Please do good work. Don't use other sources. Reword, put things together. If there is a quote that you need to include, because it's just the most amazing quote in the world, cite that quote so that it's not stealing. I think that's it. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful week ahead. So enjoy it. Stay on top of the work. Finish strong. It is now past the deadline to be able to drop the class. So you got to power through, do the best that you can. And here's your question for the week to answer, which is, what city were the dead Kennedys formed in? And that's it. Have a great week, and we will talk soon.